What's up guys, welcome back to the channel, and I'm excited to talk about this shoe. This is the Endorphin Speed 4. Now for a lot of last year, if someone was asking me for a shoe that could really do anything, I would usually steer them in the way of the Endorphin Speed 3. Now I'm happy to report that Saucony has made a few changes with the Endorphin Speed 4. It isn't just a revamped Speed 3, and here's a bit of a conundrum. I think that even if you liked or disliked the Speed 3, I think maybe the Endorphin Speed 4 is worth a look. Alright, let's get started off with those disclosures. This video is in collaboration with my friends over at Roadrunner Sports. Roadrunner Sports was good enough to send me this pair of the Endorphin Speed 4 for the purpose of review. However, they haven't told me what to say, they don't have any editorial privileges, and all the thoughts and opinions are my own. But that said, if you want to pick up a pair of the Endorphin Speed 4 for yourself from Roadrunner Sports, I will provide a link in the show notes below. So let's get started off with price. The Endorphin Speed 4 is the same price as last year. It's $170, which I'm just going to come right out and say it, it's incredible value for money. This shoe really delivers on that $170. So perhaps this is the first time you are hearing of the Endorphin Speed series, and you might be wondering what kind of shoe this is. And I mean, what kind of runs will you use it for? And I think this is the real beauty of the Endorphin Speed 4, because it's actually quite versatile. But here's the thing, there are a few changes between the 3 and the 4, and I think where the Endorphin Speed 3 was still a versatile shoe, but it was more versatile to the slow end of the spectrum, and you could pick up paces in it beautifully. But when I compare it to the Endorphin Speed 4, I think the Endorphin Speed 4 is more biased to the speedier end of the spectrum. And look, I still think this shoe is going to work well for those easier paces, maybe getting up to moderate paces, but I think it performs a little better at the top end than the Speed 3 does. But we're going to dig more into that in just a second. The stack height and drop remains the same as last year. We have 36 in the heel, 28 in the forefoot for an 8mm drop. Saucony claims that in a US men's size 9, the Endorphin Speed 4 tips the scale at 8.2 ounces or 233 grams. That's a 4-gram increase in weight over the Endorphin Speed 3, which equates to 1.7%. However, in my size, a US men's size 13, it tips the scale at 10.4 ounces or 294 grams, which for me is a 16-gram increase or 5.6%. But if I'm totally honest, the increase in weight isn't noticeable when it's on my foot. I did run in both shoes at the same time. We'll talk more about that in a second. So let's start at the top. Let's work our way down. I'm going to hold this up and you can see this heel collar right here. To me, this is very typically Saucony. There is a lot of padding around the heel collar, and yet there's not. It's not like a daily trainer where they really stuff in as much padding as they can. It's a nice use of padding. I thought it had a very nice step-in feel, and I think Saucony is one of the better brands when it comes to their heel collar and how they design the padding. The heel counter is super rigid. It really had my heel locked in nicely. The upper is a nice airy engineered mesh. Now I think it's slightly thicker than last year's Endorphin Speed 3 upper, but there are plenty of laser drilled holes all the way through it, just making it nice and ventilated. I didn't notice my feet overheating at all. The upper does have a lot of structure to it. It locked down across my foot well. We do have several overlays contributing to that structure of the upper. We've got the logo, of course the heel counter is internal, making it very rigid. We've got some overlays coming around the toe box as well as the underlay, giving it a little structure. And then of course the overlays coming right along the eyelet chain, just to add a little strength to that when you're cinching down the laces. The Speed 4 does have that additional eye loop in case you want to use a runner's knot. However, I didn't have to. I found lacing them normally gave my heel a good enough lockdown. There was no slip when I was running in it. The tongue is light and breathable. It's very aerated all the way through except to the top where we've got a little extra padding. There is no lace loop here in the middle, but it is fully gusseted on both sides, and I didn't experience the tongue moving around at all. However, while we're talking about the upper, I just want to draw your attention to the eyelet chain and how close they are together. Do you see that? And my foot is already out of the shoe, obviously, but they are still very close together. So when my foot is in the Endorphin Speed 4, I do have to cinch those laces quite tight, and the eyelet chains come very close together. That is indicating to me that there is too much volume in the upper of this shoe for my foot. Now, of course, we're all different, and if your foot is a little higher volume, then you may fit this shoe a little better. However, that really didn't translate to any negativity on the run. In fact, it's actually right on brand for the Saucony Endorphin series. All of the Endorphin shoes are just a little too big in the upper to fit my foot properly, I think how it was designed. So I'm always cinching those laces very tightly together. The shoe still feels fantastic, and it feels like I'm getting a good lockdown. However, when you're looking at it, it just looks a bit goofy, and I did notice the tongue was bunching up right here at the bottom. But again, it was really only aesthetics. I didn't actually feel that tongue bunching up on my foot. Okay, let's come down to the midsole, because this is absolutely brilliant. Saucony is using Power Run PB. That is the same foam as last year. It's a beaded PBA foam, and really it's the foam that gives this shoe its magic. Power Run PB is light and airy, it's responsive, and it gives you the feeling that you want to run fast. Now, sandwiched in between these two layers of Power Run PB is a winged nylon plate. Now, Saucony has changed the nylon plate from last year. They've added the wings to the Endorphin Speed 4, and that's just going to give it a little more structure. I guess it would also make it just a little more stable ride, but it wasn't noticeable to me. Now, I mentioned stability, but I should say that this is a neutral up-tempo shoe. It doesn't have any specific stability elements built in, although there are some attributes of the shoe that make it a little more stable. And the plate is one of them. I guess another one is this sole flare, especially on the heel. I hold this up, you can see the sole sticking out right here, and then not as much, but there is some sole flare here on the front of the forefoot too. Let's look at the bottom. Saucony has made some changes to the outsole rubber. We've now got a lattice pattern design. It's covering the entire forefoot with those strategic places on both the medial and the lateral side. As far as wear goes, this is standing up remarkably well. Because I have used this shoe a lot for like picking up the pace, I think that's maybe why I'm not seeing too much wear here on the back, but even if I look at the forefoot, it's looking remarkably well. And I think in the making of this video, I have about 45 miles in the Endorphin Speed 4. Oh, I know what I forgot to tell you. Saucony is also including their SRS, their super responsive sock liner. I love it when we can reduce something to an acronym. Anyway, it's probably just marketing, but I like how it sounds, and it does contribute to that step-in feel that I mentioned earlier. But now let's talk about the ride. Oh, and before we talk about the ride, I do have to mention the speed roll technology that is in the Endorphin Speed 4, because that is a big component of the ride. We can see this centered heel bevel right here, and then we have a nice toe spring, and then we can see the different colors of this Power Run PB, and it looks like the pivot point of the nylon plate is about here, which is behind the toes, and that's just a sweet spot for me. I prefer to have the rocker start just a little further back like this. Anyway, all this geometry makes this shoe very smooth and very quick in transitions. Now, I didn't take this shoe out for any really long runs, but I did do a maximum run of 13 miles in the testing phase, and the shoe felt good the whole time. There was no areas where I got hot spots. I didn't get any foot fatigue. And again, I think this is one of the benefits of the Endorphin Speed 4 over a race day shoe. And by race day shoe, I'm saying something with a carbon fiber plate, maybe like the Endorphin Pro 4 or any of the other competition out there. I think the Endorphin Speed 4 is going to be very good for a lot of people. Number one, because it's a very friendly shoe. It feels good when you put your foot in. It's easy to pick up the pace, and yet it does handle lower speeds very well. Number two, because it can pick up the pace so well, and I would say better than the Endorphin Speed 3, I'd say this is a solid option for a race day shoe. Now, keep in mind, last year when I reviewed the Endorphin Speed 3, I also made that same statement. However, the Endorphin Speed 4 just takes it a little further. The Endorphin Speed 4 feels faster than the Endorphin Speed 3. It almost feels a little more aggressive, but not in a bad way. Now look at this. I can bend this up quite well, which is a huge benefit of a nylon plate over a carbon fiber plate, which is usually a little stiffer. And oftentimes for people that don't tolerate a carbon plate well, I think maybe a nylon plate will feel better over the long run. Now, as I said, Saucony has used the same Power Run PB in the Endorphin Speed 4 as they have in the Endorphin Speed 3. I happen to have my pair of Endorphin Speed 3 right here. And just to show you what I was talking about with those laces, do you see that those eyelet chains are very close together on the Speed 3? And then we've got a little less rubber on the outsole, which could account for the Speed 3 being just slightly lighter. Now, as far as flexibility goes, you know what? Now that I do this on camera, it's almost like the Speed 3 feels a little stiffer, only slightly. But the main difference I found between the Speed 3 and the Speed 4 is when I was running slowly. And when I run slowly, I tend to heel strike, and I'm going to hold this up so you can look at this heel. The Speed 4 has a more pronounced flare at the back than the Speed 3, and I don't know if it's the shape of this midsole at the heel or it's a slightly denser formulation of Power Run PB in the Endorphin Speed 4, but the Endorphin Speed 4 did feel just slightly firmer, especially in the heel, than the Endorphin Speed 3. And before I got in the Endorphin Speed 4 for testing, I hadn't run the Endorphin Speed 3 in a while, but I did take it out for a few runs just to get used to it again. And as I said, I did run in both shoes a couple of times. So yes, the Endorphin Speed 4 rides just a little firmer and seemed to me to have slightly more pop than the Endorphin Speed 3. However, that could be due to me having a lot more volume in the Speed 3 than the Speed 4. But aside from the Speed 4 being slightly more aggressive than the Speed 3, the main thing I noticed was the softness of the heel on the Speed 3 over the Speed 4. Oh, and another thing, I like my colorway of the Speed 3 a lot better than the Speed 4. You can see this white is just getting filthy. I don't know if you can even see it on the camera, but me looking at it here in the studio, it's just getting quite dirty and dull. And I've tried scrubbing it and it's just not coming clean. So perhaps if I pick up another pair of the Speed 4, I'd love to get a solid colorway. I don't even know if Saucony's making them yet. Anyway, let's put this away. So after all that comparing the Speed 4 and the Speed 3, you're probably wondering, Matt, which one should I pick up? And here's the thing. I think it comes down to a couple of variables. Now, obviously, if you're very price conscious, the Endorphin Speed 3 is going to be less expensive than the Speed 4. That's just how it works. And the Speed 3 is an excellent shoe. And if you can get a great deal on the Speed 3, I think you should probably pick up a pair. However, if the Speed 3 and the Speed 4 are back to back, I think the Speed 4 is a superior shoe. I think Saucony has actually made some big steps forward with the Speed 4 over the Speed 3. I think it's more versatile in the direction that Saucony wants to take it. I guess what I'm saying is I think the Speed 4 fits more what Saucony's idea of the Speed 3 should have been. So they made some tweaks and came out with the Speed 4, and it's a really solid shoe. And for $170 for a shoe that you can use on race day and I think pretty confidently on race day, I think it represents incredible value. Anyway, what are your thoughts? Are you thinking of picking up a pair of the Endorphin Speed 4? If not, I'd love to know which plated trainer you're using at the moment. Let me know in the comments. Oh, and once again, I will provide a link in case you want to pick up a pair of the Endorphin Speed 4 for yourself. And I would just like to ask that if you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing and giving the video a like. And with that, it's Matt B. This has been my review of Saucony's Endorphin Speed 4. Be kind, be happy, run well. See you in a couple of days.